Philip Dorr spent most of his childhood on the Gaza Strip, where his father, a decorated World War II veteran and surgeon, along with his mother, served as missionaries. After returning to the States, Philip would go on to a career in acting and writing, later writing for the most watched Christian movies produced in Arabic. In this fascinating conversation, we discuss his life's journey, the social complexities of living and filming in Israel, causing an international event with camera gear, and the miraculous events leading to the fruition of 10 films created out of his scripts. I really had a wonderful time conversing with him, and I hope you will enjoy it just as much as we go and meet Philip Dorr.
My main, I think what would be more somewhat interesting are the God markers in my life and what ended up happening, because I ended up becoming a Baptist missionary, sort of, and because I was a screenwriter, and I grew up in Israel, but ended up going back to Israel and writing 10 scripts that we made into movies, made by Arabs, for Arabs, in Arabic. And this one here, The Savior, is dubbed in 42 languages and has been seen by over 1 billion people in the Arab world, and invited to a lot of film festivals and things. But it's played primarily on secular stations. It's of course, obviously, it's the Book of Luke, almost word for word. But we made it so that it was a teaching film. It's about, and it's it's a very interesting story. God led all the way, with some very mysterious things that happened along the way that could not have been done any other way, and certainly not by us, because we didn't have the facility nor the funds to do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the short end of it.
Okay, so let's go to the beginning of that. You said you grew up in Israel.
Yes, I grew up in the Gaza Strip, and my father was a surgeon, and there's a pretty interesting story about that, because it also lends to the end of the story here. In World War II, he was a radar operator on a B-29 and flew 32 missions from the island of Tinian over Japan. Saw the 2 planes leave to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Mm-hmm. But many of the flyers didn't come back, and they were buried on Tinian. And he told me one day he went into the graveyard, and he was sitting there, and he came from a Baptist family, a very religious family, and he said, "You know, God, if you let me live, I'll donate, I'll give you my life." And he lived miraculously with many stories which he didn't tell until he was very old. We didn't even know what he had done, and neither did his wife. That he had been decorated 5 times, clusters with the medals for coming back alive, basically. But in San Francisco, he called up my mother and asked her to marry him, and got into Johns Hopkins on the GI Bill and graduated. But the interesting story there is he wanted to go overseas with the Baptists as a physician, and he ended up with Hodgkin's disease, and they said, "You're not going anywhere until either you die or you go into remission."
Yeah.
And so he said, "Well, we'll just keep going and see what happens." And it was interesting because that was the time he needed to become a surgeon, and he did go into remission, obviously, I mean, here we are.
Yeah.
And
So I do have a question. What was his reason for not telling anybody about what happened over there? Was it? Do you think it was like a trauma about it, or just didn't?
he was a humble person, and something about dropping thousands of tons of napalm on Tokyo and Kyoto and stuff was a humbling experience for him and the other airmen, because they knew what was going on the ground. He told me the plane would come in, and there were like 250 B-29s coming at the same time, and he could see the fires down below, and he knew what was happening to the city.
Yeah.
And when that plane would hit, and it's high, it's coming in at 6,000 feet anyhow, but the heat from the flames would just push the plane up, dizzying, like so hard and so fast that it almost made him pass out. And the pilot had to steer through that, and he didn't want to talk about that because it wasn't fun for them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but he came back with a burning desire to actually make something of his life, as I believe many of those men did.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning. And I was 9 years old when we moved to the Gaza Strip, and it was an old British compound right in the very smack dab middle of town, about 5 acres of this old. If you've ever seen any movies about the British in India or wherever they've been, and you see those compounds with the gardeners and the palm trees and everything, it was just like that.
So where were you moving to that from?
We had been in Columbus, Ohio, where he did his surgical residency, and had moved from there to Gaza. They grew up in D.C., Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
My parents.
Yeah. So do you have any memory of how you felt about that at the time? Like, were you just...
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
We, at that time, and boy, do I have to say this, I'm 73 years old. So I remember back a long ways.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old. So we arrived there in 1959. And the war for the Suez Canal had happened in 56. Gaza was still under the Egyptians at that time until 67. So I was under Egypt for pretty much all the time I was in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And I found, even though we were very poor too, my father being a surgeon had a certain amount of clout to where we got invited to the upper echelons of Gaza, and got to know people who knew what was going on and how things had materially changed and things, because there were about 450,000 people in the Gaza Strip, and most of them were refugees that had been pushed out of Israel. And I'm not going to get into the politics of that, because there are stories on both sides, and I think they're legitimate.
Yeah.
And I will say this about that I think the Palestinians are in the middle of something they don't deserve. The Egyptians didn't want them leaving because they were a usable pawn in international negotiations. The United Nations had to keep care of them, UNRWA. And then when they got onto the Israeli side in 67, I was there too. I left. My father had to stay to take care of patients in the hospital. But the family was sent off to Istanbul and then to Rome to get out of the Gaza Strip while the bombs were flying around. And what happened after that was very eye-opening, because the Arab leaders around, Jordan and Egypt and Syria, always told the Palestinians, we'll kick them into the ocean, you'll come back, you can have all their land, it's going to be great. And I was in Egypt at the time that I heard Gamal Abdel Nasser saying all this stuff on the radio. And very, don't worry, we'll get your land back. You just stay put and we'll do it. Of course, it didn't happen. They lost. And in fact, the Arabs lost an awful lot of land. The Sinai Peninsula, also Jerusalem, the old city, the West Bank, the Golan Heights. It was a mess. But the important thing about that was that I got to see the other side of this. And I can't, and I'll make this statement because I think this kind of sums up what I saw, is the Palestinians had a tremendous opportunity, excuse me, in the Gaza Strip if they had had proper leadership to become a Taiwan. Mm-hmm. They had an opportunity. The Israelis would have loved it. And the Arabs would have just sat by looking, going, how did that happen?
So why do you say they would have had that opportunity?
Because they had, the Palestinians are extremely intelligent. They're very smart people. When they leave and they go to Kuwait, or if they get out, they make tremendous things out of them, businesses and things. They're very smart. And given the opportunity, and they had an opportunity to do this, right? During the 60s, 68, 9, 70, they had a port, they had an airport, they were flying international flights in and out. Of course, it was being watched by the Israelis, but then they let Arafat back in. And he messed everything up. It was very sad to see. But they had an opportunity, and ever since then they've been struggling with bad leadership, I believe.
Yeah. So, what is your life like growing up at this time? Like, your dad's working in the hospital. I suppose that's got something to do with his ministry there.
Oh yes.
And if you just want to go into that.
Yes, I will. The hospital was an amazing experience. 10 years I lived there growing up, from 9 to 18 when I came back to go to school. I scrub teched with him in the OR. We pretty much wandered wherever we wanted to. There was a wood shop, there was a mechanic shop. We learned an awful lot about life and things and how things worked. And we had good friends, playmates, and it was growing up pretty much in a sort of paradise. Honestly, I had two T-shirts and 2 pairs of shorts that I remember, and I don't remember taking a bath maybe once every 3 weeks. It's a kid's paradise.
Yeah.
My parents would say, "Did you take your bath?" "Oh yeah." Oh dear, I shouldn't tell on them like that. But it was very interesting, and it was a fascinating experience with my friends and the friends I met. I still keep in touch with some of the fellows that escaped and went to Bethlehem. Some came to the States.
Yeah. So speaking of the States, so you're there till you're 18. So do you go back to the States and go to school, I'm guessing?
Mm-hmm. I went to Carson Newman University right outside Knoxville. And it was a Baptist school, so it was sort of a cocoon. But this was back in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So I had a 2S deferment, and something happened there at that time, which I'm just going to say happened to 50 of us. And I don't know what happened to the other 49, but I got a call from my draft board and said, "You're called up. You're drafted. And I just torn ligaments in my ankle playing soccer and at Vanderbilt. And so I hobbled up there to the bus stop, and this lady sergeant pokes her head out it was 4 a.m. in the morning. It was freezing, end of November. It was freezing. And she pokes her head out of the bus. She said, "What's the matter with you?" I go, I tore some ligaments in my ankle, but I'll be okay. And she said, "You can't pass the physical with torn ligaments in your ankle. Yeah, they'll heal." I was freezing. I felt the warmth coming off that bus. I wanted on that bus. I was stupid, right? I'm just stupid. And she said, "No, you could." She paused for a minute. She had a thing in her, clipboard in her hand. She was looking down this thing like this, and she said, "You can't pass this physical. You look, you go back and we'll be in touch." Closed the door, wrote something on this clipboard, and left. I never heard another word from these people. I waited. I think maybe I got saved because I went back to the registrar's office and said, "What happened to my W-2?" And this girl who worked there pulled this box out, and she goes, "Well, she raffled through all these papers. She says, "It looks like there's about 50 of them here, and you didn't sign it." I said, "But my P.O. box is right there on the thing. You could have just put it in there." She said, "Well, they just told us to stick them in these boxes, and eventually you'd show up." For sure I did. Oh, maybe they sent them off. I don't even remember if I signed it right there. I was just so overwhelmed that there were 50 of these poor guys in this box and we were all watching the war. It was awful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible. Not that I probably would have made a really good soldier because I was very pro-America.
Yeah.
Having lived overseas and stuff.
So you kind of wanted to join up then? Or was that even in your mind, or was it just you wanted to prove yourself, sort of?
Well, that would have been the idea.
Yeah.
I was sports-minded and, playing soccer and gung-ho and young and stupid. I was 18-year-old fodder. I would have been good.
Yeah.
But after I see what happened and going back historically to see the movies that were made about Vietnam, and I see a lot of documentaries because I'm interested.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful I didn't go.
Yeah.
I am very thankful, but I would have gone and I would have been good.
Yeah. So you have torn ligaments. You don't get drafted. What happens from there?
Well, I got into theater, and I did a lot of acting. I liked it. I thought I was good at it. Doesn't every actor? Yeah, I think I'll try this out. And so I pursued it, and I got jobs. They're a little sketchy. I played 6 seasons in the Smoky Mountain Passion Play. 6 summers. Practically every role in the show.
Yeah.
I think the producer director was getting tired of me showing up. But I played Judas, I played Jesus, I played Herod, I played a bunch of different parts in the different years, which is very interesting because it also has something to do with where I ended up. Mm. But I'll make this squeeze these years into a very short period of time. I spent 3 years with a theater rep company doing one night show stands around the country. Did shows in 42 states in repertory. That was a lot of fun, and I got to see a lot of the country. One night stands, 42 states. We were driving. In fact, I would have dreams about getting on stage and not remembering what show I was supposed to be in and not remembering the lines to the show.
Yeah.
It was nightmares. So I think we all had, or what town are we in today? So I understand when comics go boom, 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 and they make mistakes like introducing themselves, or even politicians go, what town am I in today?
Yeah.
You know, I understand that because you're just rush, set up. But that was packed into those years. And then I moved out to L.A. I spent 5 years out there. I made 2 action adventures, Gil Gerard, Dan Haggerty, Adam West. Tells you how old I am.
So when you say you made them, what's that
I was
mean?
acting. I was co-starring
Okay.
with these fellows. And it was a lot of fun. I learned an awful lot in those movies.
So what would the name with Adam West, just so I can
Adam West was
look it up later?
Night of the Kick Fighters.
Night of the Kickfighter?
Yes. And Gil Gerard was A Soldier's Fortune. And they're still available.
Yeah.
My theater professor looked at Night of the Kick Fighters and he said, I think that's the worst movie I've ever seen. I didn't need to hear that, but it was. It is. If anybody wanted to learn a lot about movies, they should watch that movie because it's. Look, buddy, and all you guys, I love you. We had fun, and I thought we did a good job. They ran out of money, so they got a different production company in,
Yeah.
and they tried to make a serious movie, and this was supposed to be Airplane,
Yeah.
a spoof on kick fighting, and it does still have the aspects in it, but they tried to make a serious
But then they tried to-
movie out of it,
Yeah.
and it didn't work. So anyway, I tried to explain to people, it was really going well until, but here's the funny thing. The guy who funded this movie was a toilet paper manufacturer from Japan. They don't use toilet paper in Japan. So he got caught for laundering money. And this was one of his laundering things. And so that was the end of the funding for our movie. But I thought it was funny, sort of. But anyway, LA was Hotel California describes it perfectly. Perfectly. You're lucky if you escape.
Yeah.
You really are. And practically everybody I met there was managing an apartment building or something. And I really feel like I escaped with my life. I came home to take care of my father who had Parkinson's. And I worked in Knoxville, Tennessee for 10 years doing industrial films and commercials like Dollywood, Dolly Parton. That was, just whatever I could find to do. I'm going to get busted, doesn't matter. I was a Screen Actors Guild member, but I was just doing anything I could find to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they care. You don't, do you? So anyway, I'm too old.
I've only got like 130 something subscribers anyway.
Okay, I don't pay dues anymore. They gave me a SAG card now because I'm so old. I get it for free, so they can't hurt me. But I took care of my father.
Yeah.
And helped my mother out for 10 years. And
So then they had moved back to the States. by
yes,
that
they
time.
moved back. He had Parkinson's for 20 years.
I may have the video for the first part of it, and then the rest will be a picture of you.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Because it really gets interesting now. So anyway, he had Parkinson's for 20 years. Mm. And the last 10 were really difficult.
Yeah.
And as he went further down and losing his abilities and stuff, I could kind of see him slipping away. And we were very fortunate. The last day of his life, he for 3 years he spent it in a little home with two nurses that he had worked with in the hospitals a bit around Knoxville. And he called the nurse in. He couldn't speak very well at all. And he called the nurse in and said, "Get my family." And amazingly enough, the day before he passed away, he was in a wheelchair, and his little legs were so skinny, he was pulling the skin off to see how he had been, losing muscle and everything. And couldn't really speak well. And as I was leaving, I said, "I love you, Dad." And he leaned around the nurse. He said, "Me too," like this. And that's the last thing he ever said to me. And then he got the nurse to call us. It was a Sunday morning on Father's Day, and June 18th, and called the family. And there were quite a few of us there for Father's Day, I think.
Yeah.
And we went to the home, and he already had the death rattle going and didn't say anything to us. But we sat around him for 45 minutes singing praise songs and just enjoying being around him and singing hymns that he loved. And then he passed away. And the amazing thing was, I was on my knees, and my brother was standing above me, and we were just looking at him, his face, and he opened up his eyes, and he looked up at my brother, and then he looked at me, and his pupils just went. I saw him leave, and I couldn't. I was this close to his eyes, and I couldn't believe I saw the moment he left. It was an amazing moment. And so we spent the next 30 minutes singing around him. They didn't bother us. I don't know why. They didn't come in. They didn't do anything. And we sat in there. Maybe they didn't know anything had happened.
Yeah.
And we sat in there and sang around him for another 30 minutes, and then told him he had passed, and we left. But that's when things started to happen. I had been writing scripts and been talking to people and sending scripts out to people that I knew, and by then I had written 10 scripts. I was just peddling them. I had a script called Powder Brown that was about a little black boy in Clinton, Tennessee, that had mysteriously died in the presence of two spinsters, and they pinned the murder on him. And he was 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Didn't have a weapon. It was an very interesting story. Well, Chuck Gordon, the producer, had made October Skies in Clinton. And so I knew he knew this story. So I did a bunch of research and wrote the story of Powder Brown, the script. And one of the news commentators at the TV station said, "Hey, I'll try to peddle this to him, because clout, whatever." And so he got Chuck to read it. And Chuck brought the Birmingham, Mississippi guy in there, and they looked over the script, and there were still people. I don't know exactly what the problem was, but there were people still alive from that. And so it would have been a very difficult problem, because I think the person who probably really did it, the family either was still alive or the family was still alive. Yeah. And so I think he said, "No, I've got to pass on this."
Yeah.
But Sam Brown said they had spent a lot of time looking it over, just trying to figure how they might rework it or rewrite it. So that gave me a lot of hope and a little inspiration. Maybe something was going to happen, but it didn't, and I'm glad it didn't. You know how things go when you look back over your life and you go, "Wow, yeah. I'm really glad that didn't happen." So. That's okay. I have a camera like that too, just about like that.
Yeah, and I picked that up on eBay for like $45.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I do stuff like that too.
Just I
You're a smart man.
I've got a good camera, but it shuts off recording after like 20 minutes or so.
Oh.
So
You could use your iPhone here.
yeah,
Nah, don't do that.
I'm professional. I gotta have a $45 camera separate from.
It works.
Yeah. So you said you were talking about the way things work out.
Yes.
So how did it work out from there?
Yes. I had been in touch with my brother, who's a missionary in Israel. He was actually working in Cyprus at that time, and they were starting a project, and it was going to be on radio. They were going to do it on radio, and it was going to be scripts of we called them bridges and barriers. So it was going to be Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. It was going to be the luminaries that bridged Islam and Christianity.
Yeah.
But we were just going to do our stories. We weren't going to Islamize them or anything. We're just going to do them to show our stories. And so they had a writer in Egypt, but they needed somebody to do a synopsis of each story. So my brother said, "Hey, 2 years, come over and work and do this in Cyprus and do the summaries and the synopses so that he can write the scripts." I said, "Okay, that'd be fun." So off I went. I had to go through the Southern Baptist ILC training thing. That was 6 weeks, very much a lot of fun. Since I had already had the growing up experience, I thought, well, I know something, a little bit about this, maybe. Of course, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And
so I was just thinking about this. I'm trying to see the timeline. What year would this have been?
2002 and 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my father died in 2000. And so I went over there, and I worked on the Adam and Eve script, and we actually filmed it in Egypt. Huge problems. We weren't allowed to go over there. We weren't allowed to be on the set. It had to go through a review board, and certain things couldn't be said, and so it ended up that Egypt was just not possible. We couldn't do 10 movies in Egypt with this process. Mm-hmm. It was so laborious and so painful. And it ended up, we did make it, and it turned out to be rather funny, comical, for a lot of reasons. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
So we were in a pickle, and we had decided to go from radio to film with a lot more money.
Yeah.
So this did not work out and did not sit well with the people that were overseeing this. And so they said, well, what can we do? And since my brother John was in touch with all the people in Israel, he contacted a fellow in Israel and said, do you know anybody in Israel that works with Arab TV or somebody?
Yeah.
And he said, yes, I do know somebody. His name is Victor Kamar, and he does all the Arab programming for Channel 2 in Israel. And so we flew over there to reconnoiter and look around and see what we could see, and we met him. And he took the script and he read it, and he came back and he had a meeting with the sound fellow and the translator who did all the National Geographic translating. He said, I can do this. And we have lots of good actors. And we're going, huh? In Israel? You've got Arab actors? Oh yes, lots. And they farm out to Jordan, to Syria, to Egypt, They go all over the place and do film. And they do film in Europe. And so we held auditions, and it was amazing. And we didn't do Adam and Eve first, we did Abraham. And then we did Isaac, and we did Jacob. And we hired a whole troop of Bedouins from Jericho. And they knew how to build the tents. We bought herds, and they took care of the herds and ate half of them. That's a whole story in itself, really funny. But it was astonishing. 4 of the films now are on the IMDb film website. You can look them up. Actually 5 with the Savior. But there are 10 in all. And many, many amazing things happened that God literally answered prayer, opened doors, shut doors. We went and filmed in Morocco. We filmed in Jordan. We filmed in a lot of very amazing places because these fellows knew people. And it was it was probably the most serious endeavor I could have ever imagined myself being a part of. And a small part. I wrote the scripts, but I was on the set. I was allowed to be on the set, which was magical. As a consultant, I guess. They didn't need a lot of consulting. But it was funny. It was a great experience for me. 10 years we spent filming these. And then I want to get, there were other things happening on the side, which is most important to me. I met my wife in Jerusalem. I was living in Jerusalem at the time and met my wife. She came over with the sister of my sister-in-law, married to my brother, with her sister, who taught Hebrew at Oral Roberts. And so my wife came with her teacher to Jerusalem. And so we took 2 weeks and showed them all around and toured all around all the sites and everything. And so I got to know her. And we really hit it off. And so she decided to come back. The whole idea was to see if she wanted to go to Hebrew University. And she, I think, for a lot of reasons, decided to go to Hebrew University and came back. And so for 2 years there, we spent a lot of time walking all over Jerusalem every day, 2-3 hours in big circles around Jerusalem, getting to know it, it was magic, just magic. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. And we toured all over the country, doing things. That was on the downtime that we weren't filming, and things, and we got to know each other really well, and it was a spectacular time. And then something happened which I have to put in here because it's like a little cherry on top of this cake. We talked about getting married, and the reason being that we were going to get a Jerusalem diamond, because the Jews have a big diamond industry, cutting and doing whatever. At least we had read about this. We didn't know much about it, but Jerusalem diamonds. So the next day I was going to go look for a diamond. She had class, something. So every day I'd go walk. It was about, I belonged to a gym just up on the other side where the Knesset was just right here, the Parliament, and my little workout place was just right over the hill where the Knesset was and the bus station, Crown Plaza. People who have been in Jerusalem will know the area well. The Gonsacker Park down below in the valley. And so I'm walking up there, and it's a half mile to get to the gym, and they're doing a sidewalk, and they've got rollers up there and dirt. They're packing dirt in there and rolling it down and stuff. And they'd gotten to a certain place, they'd quit, and I'm walking along on this new nice paved thing. It's beautiful. And I get right to where they had quit paving, and it was about that, not even an inch off the blacktop where they had put this fill dirt, and this thing just went bing. I bent down, I piddled around, and pulled out this diamond solitaire ring. It had to have been an old Arab ring because it was only half of it. The diamond was still in the setting with 21 little diamonds on the side of it. And it was 18 karat gold, had the stamp on it. So I go to the gym, and I've put this thing in my spandex. We wore spandex back then. In my spandex. And just like Gollum, I'm pulling this thing out in the gym, looking at it, and, rubbing the dirt off a little bit more and stuff, going, is this right? Is this possible? So I texted her in the middle of class, and I wrote, I think I found our diamond. Very presumptuous. It could have been plastic, right? So I get back, and I said, look at this. I found this diamond. And she, what? You where? So I would show her. And here. I did not get this diamond looked at until I got back to the States and was going to propose to her, just to make sure. I was so paranoid that it was a fake. It turned out to be a very good diamond, and the guy says they don't put nasty diamonds in settings like this 18 karat. So you found a very nice diamond, and it was a third of a carat solitaire. So she still has it, wears it today, but we needed that, I don't know what you would call it, inspiration to seal the deal.
Yeah.
And it did. But we go back on that many times as I call them God markers. Every time something happens that's very much out of our control, but is very much a path setter as a God marker, and this was definitely a big one.
So, you mentioned going back to the States. Were you still making movies at that time, or?
Yes.
So are you going between the States and Israel, or?
I only went back to the States for a 2-month period before I was to come back to Israel to continue working. Okay. So I got engaged to her when I had gone back to the States. Then I went back to Israel and worked some more on the films. And I did go back to the States to get married, and then we came back and spent another year in Israel while I was still making the films.
So I was going to ask you more, because you talked about these sort of miraculous doors being open to you and stuff. So could you give like an example or two of that?
Yeah. Well, this whole thing. When I applied to go in to get this position with the International Mission Board of the Southern Baptists, I didn't really have any qualifications, so I had to go through a lot of scrutiny. And I didn't know years later, and I was a little paranoid about it, Hollywood and all this business tracking me down. and they're very scrupulous about things. And so I had to go through a process, and years later, the boss of my brother, the fellow at the top, he says, I just want you to know that you would not have gone out there if Jess Moody, who was the pastor at the church I went to in Hollywood, had not given you a high recommendation. He said there's no way you would have gone out there, been chosen out there. And I thought back on that and said, wow, I owe Jess Moody, and I can't even tell him how much I owe him because he's passed away. You know, he's gone. But it was kind of a bit of a miracle because I hadn't even put Jess Moody down as somebody to contact. That had just sort of come up in the discussion with some of the counselors and things that I had gone to Van Nuys Baptist in California. And so they had called Jess Moody and said, do you know anything about this guy? And Jess had said, yeah, he's good. He'll do well. But that was really an amazing thing. More to the things that are going that past now as we finish script number 9, and just so many things had happened. In Morocco, we were going to do The Savior. I had written the scripts now for all the shows, all the films, and so we had them like ready to go to the translator, and we were going to do The Savior in Morocco. So we flew everybody there that we were going to, and had done screen tests and everything. And I don't know what happened, but the rug got pulled out from under us very mysteriously. And in fact, boy, I don't know if, well, yeah, I'm not visual, so that's okay. What happened was that we had gotten out of there so fast, we left trunks of equipment there. And later on, they were to be sent back to Israel from Morocco, and they were coming on this plane, and somebody was supposed to courier them. Well, they got to France, and the guy who was supposed to courier them didn't get on the plane. So the Israelis called, sirens went off, everything went off, and they had the Mossad and the SWAT team come to that plane because the guy had left his bags on the plane and not gotten on. What would you think that was all about? You know,
Yeah.
they're going to blow the plane up, right? Well, the some of our fellows that worked on our show were in the intelligence agencies. So they were going out to the plane to see what was going on. And they got there, and it was our stuff that had caused this plane to go. And here they are. They knew what it was. They were going, oh my goodness, it's our stuff. And here we are, called up with our thing on the hood going 90 miles an hour going down to the airport. And it's our stuff that caused the thing.
Caused an international incident.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. So we got our stuff back, right? But the interesting thing was that all fell apart, and we were very discouraged. Very. And so we had finished up the Old Testament, and God had been so good to us. And by then, I had moved back to America with my wife. I had my first child in Bethlehem. There's a...
Was it in a manger?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It was only a couple of 100 yards from the manger.
Yeah.
The Templars, the Crusaders, still run a hospital in Bethlehem for prenatal and birth. And so
Yeah.
we had a midwife in a Crusader hospital and the birth of our first daughter there. It was amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
Oh, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Because once a month we had to drive into Bethlehem, which is like Jurassic Park. If you ever see it, these gigantic metal doors open and close to let you into the Arab territory.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get in and out of there. And bless their hearts, on the other side there are burnt tires and rocks and graffiti on the wall and things. And it was hard for me because I have friends still in there, in Bethlehem. But they could come out. I mean, we were able to see each other, and they could visit us outside. Just had to get the papers, you know.
Yeah.
But we had our first child there, and it was wonderful. It was really a glory. I'm so glad, so amazing that we had the experience.
Yeah. So I was wondering, because you were talking about, at this point you've gone through the Old Testament in your films and everything. So how are y'all marketing this to an Arab audience?
We weren't really. At that point, we didn't really know what to do. We were stymied, actually. It was difficult. We needed the Savior to be done. We called it from creation to Christ. So we needed the full picture of mankind and why did we need a Savior? What was the importance of having a Savior, and how did God work the crimson thread through His stories to get to the Savior? What was the importance? And why did it take so long? Why couldn't He have just sent Jesus in the first place and gotten this all over with? What is the reason? And so we needed it to bookend this amazing story. Actually, we do have the script for Acts of the Apostles, but it hasn't been made yet. But the Savior is honestly one of the most amazing experiences of our entire life. I include everybody in this because it was everybody. We didn't know what to do. We were stuck, and we had raised money. We had about $5 million from. It was from Baptists, but it wasn't from the organization. It was from individuals. In fact, all of the money that put these shows together were individuals that donated, so that we couldn't be associated with an organization. So we had about $5 million, just a little over. And somebody suggested that we go to Bulgaria. Listen, this is an amazing story. So yeah, sure, why? We'll go to Bulgaria. What? So we fly to Bulgaria, Sofia, Bulgaria, and there's an old Russian propaganda studio that has been bought by Millennium Films, and from Hollywood bought it.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of Israelis running the thing. And so they just started. They're taking costumes out of boxes, thousands of Russian old costumes out of boxes, and getting this all organized and everything. And it's huge. And they're doing movies. They did Stallone's Expendables, and the 300 is coming to film there. All this stuff, and we're going, whoa, we kind of don't belong here. But the Israeli, because our director, now our old director passed away, Victor Kamar, but his son, Yusuf Kamar, who now has changed his name to Robert Savo because he wanted to have a more, I guess, European sort of title. could speak Hebrew and Arabic. So these Israelis could speak perfect English. So we went all around the studio, and it was just amazing. They had everything we could imagine or need. And so, wow. So we go back to the office, and they'd spent a couple hours with us. And he said, he's sitting there with his little calculator dude. He says, we can do your film for $15 million, and that's, us cutting a lot of corners here because we like you guys, because you're from Israel. Man, our faces just, I think you could have picked our teeth up off the floor. We couldn't do it. And I looked at their faces, they were just, it was devastation. Mm-hmm. And Robert said, we only have $5 million. We'll try to raise the rest. And so his name was David Varad. And David Varad said, well, we'll, look, why don't we take you out to dinner tonight? Because we feel really bad too. Well, great. So we go back to the hotel. And
do you like McDonald's?
Yeah, right, exactly. Are we paying for this out of our measly little amount of money? So David Varad takes us to this really nice restaurant. And we're sitting in this little dining room all off the side where he goes. And he and his right-hand man we're sitting in there. And we're talking, just shooting the breeze, everything, Israel, how, weather, I don't know what, this and that. And then it gets a little personal, and he says, Robert Savo, what kind of name is that? Robert Savo. You're Arab, right? Robert goes, yes, I am. I changed my name. My real name is Yusuf Kamar, and an Arab, very Arab name, Joseph Kamar. Kamar is moon in Arabic. Joseph Kamar, Yusuf. And David Varad says, oh, Joseph Kamar, that's a nice name. And Robert says, maybe you knew my father, Victor Kamar. He worked for Channel 2 in Jerusalem. This guy, for some reason, was holding my hand. I don't know why. But he dropped my hand. He puts his hands on the table like this. He said, Victor Kamar? The Victor Kamar? He gave me my first job. 1968, David Varad had just finished design school, was sitting on the curb in Herzliya, where the film industry was at that time, on the coast in Israel, and he was crying because he had been to every production company and they said, no, we don't need you. You just got out of school, you're a student, get a job. Catch 22. So he's sitting there crying and just terrible. And here comes this big Arab man, and Victor Kamar was a big Arab man. And he looks at this little Jew sitting there. He says, what's the matter with you? And so David pours out this whole story. He's been to every production company, back and forth, up and down. And this Arab looks at him and says, stop crying. Get up off the curb. Go see da-da-da-da-da. You've got a job. Go. So David Varad got his opening into the business through Victor Kamar. He says, come back tomorrow. We start at zero. Do you think any of the three of us said one word going back to that hotel? Not a word. The car was filled with the power and might of something so big we couldn't explain it. Nothing is impossible with God. Nothing. You just have to be willing and at the right time and keep pushing buttons. Keep pushing. You're supposed to be there somewhere. And here it opened. I mean, the most gigantic doors. So the next day we show up. We had no idea what was going on. He took us back around and he said, Robert Savo, you're going to make this film here. You're going to make this film here. And if anybody asks you how much this film costs, you tell them $15 million, because that's how much it's going to cost. We showed up. We flew in all our Arab actors. They stayed in the hotel. The studio sort of had a hotel. And it was called the Jasmine, and all the sheets smelled like jasmine. I'm serious. It was amazing. So we started making the film. Another interesting thing happened. The fellow that we wanted to play Jesus, he had done Cain and Adam and Eve, and he had done King David for us in King David, in David. And he was the most amazing actor. So we had asked him if he would play Jesus. And he talked to his imam, and he said, no, you can't. You're a Muslim, you can't play Jesus. So he came and he said, I can't. So he went back to Berlin or wherever he was getting actors' jobs. Well, anyway, when we got this thing with with Bulgaria, a little before that had happened, because we were trying to set everything up, he called our director and he said, I want to play Jesus. So when we had come to Bulgaria, we had Jesus. Amazing. Well, we didn't find out a whole bunch of this other part of this story until we had gotten all set up and he had arrived and everything. And we found out that he had gone to Italy just on a whim, and the Shroud of Turin was being shown. And you have to get tickets way in advance and all this stuff. He sort of showed up there and he said, I'd like to go in and see this. And the lady said, are you by yourself? And he said, yeah, I'm an actor from Berlin. And she said, well, I can let you in if you want to come in. He's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
So he went in and saw the Shroud of Turin, and something happened to him. And he called up the director and he said, I have to play this role. It's not the whole story. It goes further. So he arrives in Bulgaria, and it's the day before we're going to start shooting and everything. He comes and he gets my brother and Robert together and everything. He says, I can't do this role unless I'm baptized. I want to be baptized. I understand. And so we went through the prayer and actually through the script and understood. And we baptized him in the hotel pool. And then we started filming. And then we met his wife. And she was from Berlin. She was German. And he had just gotten married, a year ago or so. And come to find out that her mother had been on a set with him and had been his language coach. And she loved him. And so she brought him home to supper and introduced him to her daughter. And they got married. Well, it comes to find out that she and her daughter were Baptists. I'm just saying that didn't have anything to do with the story particularly, but we laughed.
Yeah.
We sort of giggle a little bit that this is sort of how things work, isn't it? But it proved to me, I had breakfast with Judas and Jesus every morning. And Judas was a good Christian. And he had been talking to Jesus for a long time to get him to become a Christian. And so at breakfast, we'd have these discussions. And it seems that Judas had given Jesus a Bible a long time earlier, and Jesus had not wanted to read it. or talk about it too much. So finally, when he arrived and Judas and Jesus were sitting at the same table talking about these mysteries of the gospel, it was some of the deepest, most amazing conversations of spiritual enlightenment and growth that I have ever heard in my entire life. Because these fellows had walked around Jerusalem with us also as Arab Israelis, walking around, seeing all this and being in the same places and everything, and it was real to them as well. And the stories were real. Nothing's changed over there except they put a little concrete on it.
Yeah.
It's still pretty much the same. And so the conversations were wonderful. And other of the cast would join in also. We had Druze, we had Muslim, we had all kinds of different Arab actors that we had auditioned. Like 500 actors we had gone through to audition to come, and it was marvelous. But these were the stories that just I hold dear in my heart as the gigantic God markers, and I live my life that way every day. Buying this farm was a giant God marker. I will end everything by telling you this story. I have 3 daughters, and they're amazing. And we go to the Anglican school here in Tyler, and it is a marvelous school. And we became Anglican. We had known Anglicans in Jerusalem. We loved them. The fellow that now is the priest at Christ Church in Jerusalem was a friend of ours, and so it wasn't a big leap. So when and our girls have enjoyed this school tremendously. But we had lived in town, and we're always looking at Zillow and looking at houses and whatever. And we had 3 houses in Tyler, made money on each one because I had done some construction work in the past, in whenever, Hollywood, wherever. That's how I fed my face. And so we had made money on them. We had a little stash, and so COVID came, and we all got sick, and we realized things were changing. And so in Zillow one day, this 26-acre property showed up, and my wife goes, "I've never seen this before." And it's in the heart thing in the Zillow where you hit it to you love it, you're going to come back to it and look at it. She says, "I've never seen that property before. Let's go out and look at it." And so we came out, we drove out here, and a little red car was right behind us. And it turned out to be the realtor. And she said, "What are you doing out here? I haven't even listed this place yet." I go, "Huh? You haven't?" "No." "Well, when are you going to list it?" "I'm taking pictures, in fact, Monday." "Well, can you just hold off on this?" Because we had looked all around,
Yeah.
And she said, "We're selling it, okay, well, I guess." So we listed our house in town. We put in an offer on this place. They accepted it. And here's the kicker. Here's the God marker. Well, that was one of them, the little heart thing, of course. But the real one was every house we bought in Tyler, there was a bill next door. Bill, bill, bill. So I came back out here before we had signed all the papers and looking around, and this truck drives up. Looks about like yours. And then this Mexican's in there, and a very nice fellow, didn't speak a lot of English, but we got along fine. And at the end of the conversation, he says, "I used to take care of the animals here." Well, it used to be his daughter's property they were getting a divorce, and so the explanation for it going up for sale. And he says, just coming out here to see it for the last time. And so I shook hands and said, come anytime. I'd love for you to tell me more about this place. And he says, and I said, my name's Phil. And he says, my name's Thomas. I didn't think a thing about it. So I go home, and I go, yeah, I met this guy. You know, he's a really nice guy, and his name was Thomas. All three of my girls go, Thomas! Thomas! Another Thomas! Just like that. Another Thomas. Out of nowhere. It's like sealing the deal, right? But that's not the kicker. I have right there in that window a stained glass window from a church in Baltimore that my uncle gave my mother, and she gave it to me. I hadn't really paid any attention to this stained glass window, but I don't know, since we were moving it and putting it back up and everything. And I looked at it pretty close, and there are little letters on this thing. It's St. Thomas. Hilarious.
Yeah.
Anyway, that sealed the deal.
So. You said you were gonna end the stories there, but I do want to know, because you talked about the movie and it being distributed everywhere. And I asked you earlier about how y'all were distributing.
Yes, now it has happened.
Yeah.
In Bulgaria, this movie studio does all the business for large productions, Expendables, 300. I don't know what they've made since. I don't keep track of it. But they have all the people to do all the upgrade and amazing business with cameras, and stuff. And they shot with the highest quality. They took all our films. We had to pay for it, but they gave us a deal. And they upgraded it, every one of them, to broadcast quality. And this now has been dubbed into 42 languages and has played all over the world and been invited to many international film festivals, and is the only Christian production asked for and invited to Islamic film festivals in the Persian Gulf and areas,
so,
Kuwait and things.
So is there a reason, there a way y'all shot it or something that made it more
Yes.
accessible? Yes.
Yes, the fellow actually who does the music for the film is Jordan's the King's, what do you call it? Minstrel, composer. Thank you. His composer, and he didn't want to do the show. The movie. He was asked, and he said, "No, I can't do this. I'm, Christian thing." And so we sent him a scene. We sent him the scene of the Lord's Prayer, and he watched that scene of Jesus teaching the disciples to pray. And he called the director back and he said, I have to do this film. It's another instance of his heart was touched, and he was going through a very difficult time. And this spoke to him, and he wrote the music, amazing music. Arab, oh boy. And the funny thing about Arab films is they're slow. They're slower because the audience talks through it. Did you see what that had just happened? What do you think about it? You can't believe, I can't believe that happened. So they talk.
It's sort of like a sitcom where they pause for the...
Yes, and so it's slow.
Yeah.
Because we know, and the audience is going to ponder every single thing that's said. Did you believe that? How's that? And so it has turned out to be one of the most watched films on secular TV. In fact, we've had so many miracles of managers of stations that said, I'm sticking my neck on the block to do this. but I'll show it. They got more phone calls. They've gotten more people say, show that again. And he'd call Robert up and he'd say, can I have this for a little while longer? That things have progressed. And here's the thing that made it special, and we had several people talk about this to us, especially a fellow that's high up in a position. He said, I'm glad that I saw this film. He said, because I never knew what Christians believed. I wasn't allowed to know. I never knew. He said, now this explains so much, and I'm really glad I saw it, and thank you. And if for no other reason, that's a great reason.
Yeah, that makes it all worth it.
Yeah, it does.
So if somebody wanted to watch these films, are there any like streaming platforms it's on?
If you just put in Google The Savior, or you go to IMDb and put in The Savior, it will come up. And it will show several, but it will show this one. And if you follow those links, it will take you to an English dubbed production of it. And you can watch it for free. I did it just to see if it was possible. And it worked. But you have to just dig a little bit just by going to the...
I'll do the digging and then I'll link it down in the description of this.
Okay, yeah.
So... if anybody wants to check it out, it'll be down there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've had a pretty incredible life, and I just want you to thank you for sitting down and spend the time to talk to me about it.
Isaac, it's been a real pleasure because I don't really pass this way very often. I try to keep my girls sort of inspired with things, but it's something that sometimes... You are told to keep things in your closet, that it's important. It's important for you to know, and to walk in faith, and that many times that's where I sit and stand. But the opportunity, as you presented it, you got pretty much the whole shebang.
Well, talking to Jan today, he says you're really going to have to push it out of him, and I was like, well, I thought I was going to have to do a lot more work than this today.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Oh, hi. You actually made it to the end. Not many people do that. I guess you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and like and subscribe. Share it with people if you want to. And just tune in next time because I'm always interviewing different people. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.